Hi, I'm Marcus. $2.4 million. That's the number that ended my family. Not because we fought over it, but because my brother took it, my mother defended him, and I spent 3 years believing I was the one who'd lost my mind. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang, and everything I thought I knew shattered like glass. The call came while I was sitting in my car outside a grocery store in Portland, hands still gripping the steering wheel even though the engine had been off for 10 minutes. I wasn't going inside. I'd driven there on autopilot, the way you do when your brain needs something to focus on besides the noise in your head. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The phone screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Boston area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had. The voice on the other end was professional, clipped, the kind of tone that comes from someone who delivers bad news for a living. This is Patricia Chin from Whitmore & Associates. I'm trying to reach Marcus Sullivan regarding the estate of Eleanor Sullivan. My grandmother. Dead for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. I know because I counted every single one of them, wondering why she'd left everything to my brother Derek and nothing to me. Wondering what I'd done wrong. Wondering if all those summers the first spent at her house in Cape Cod meant as little to her as they apparently did. I'm listening, I said, though my throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. There's been a development in the estate settlement. We need you to come to our office as soon as possible. There are documents that require your immediate attention. I don't understand. The estate was settled years ago. A pause. Then, Mr. Sullivan, I think it's best we discuss this in person. Can you be here tomorrow? I lived in Portland. Boston was a 6-hour drive, longer if you hit traffic around Portsmouth. I had work. I had a life that barely held together on good days and threatened to collapse entirely on bad ones. But something in her voice, something careful and measured, made my pulse quicken. I'll be there, I said. She gave me an address and a time. 10 in the morning. Don't be late. Then she hung up, and I sat there in that parking lot as the sun dipped below the buildings, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and I tried to remember how to breathe. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warning labels or flashing lights. It comes quietly, in the form of a lawyer's letter delivered on a Wednesday morning 3 years ago, informing me that my grandmother had passed away and left her entire estate to my brother Derek. Not split between us. Not divided equally. Just him. Only him. I remember standing in my apartment, still in my pajamas, coffee going cold on the counter, reading those words over and over until they stopped making sense. Derek James Sullivan is hereby named the sole beneficiary of the estate valued at approximately $2.4 million, including all properties, assets, and personal effects. I called my mother first. She lived in Providence, in the same house where Derek and I grew up, the one with the crooked shutters and the maple tree out front that we used to climb until Dad told us we'd break our necks. She answered on the third ring, her voice already defensive before I'd said a word. I heard, she said. I'm sorry, Marcus. Sorry? Mom, did you know about this? Your grandmother made her choices. It wasn't my place to interfere. But why? What did I do? Silence. The kind that fills up all the space in your chest until you can't tell if you're breathing or drowning. Then, maybe you should ask yourself that question. Maybe you should think about all the times you couldn't be bothered to visit, all the holidays you missed, all the phone calls you didn't return. I visited every summer, I said, but my voice came out weak, uncertain. I was there. I was always there. Derek was there more. And that was it. That was the line she drew, the side she chose, the door she closed. I stood in my apartment with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother's breathing, and I realized she wasn't going to fight for me. She wasn't going to question it. She'd already decided I deserved this. I hung up without saying goodbye. I called Derek next. Got his voicemail. left a message that tried to sound calm and probably came out desperate. "Hey, it's Marcus. I got the letter about Grandma's estate. Can we talk? Call me back." He never did. For weeks, I replayed every memory I had of my grandmother, searching for clues. Eleanor Sullivan had been a formidable woman, the kind who wore pearls to the grocery store and ironed her bed sheets. She'd made her money in real estate, buying up properties in Boston during the recession and selling them when the market recovered. Smart. Strategic. Not the type to make impulsive decisions. I thought about the summers I'd spent at her house. I was 12 the first time she let me help her in the garden. We planted tomatoes and basil, and she taught me how to tie the vines so they wouldn't break under their own weight. She told me stories about my grandfather, who'd died before I was born, and about growing up during the Depression, and about the importance of building something that lasts. "You're a thoughtful boy, Marcus," she'd said once, dirt under her fingernails, sun beating down on both of us. "You think before you act. That's rare." I'd held on to that. Thought it meant something. Derek never gardened with her. He was older by 4 years, more interested in sailing and parties and the social scene in Hyannis. But he called her every Sunday. He visited on her birthday. He sent flowers on Mother's Day and Christmas cards with handwritten notes. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe I'd mistaken quality for quantity. Maybe she'd wanted consistency, not depth. Or maybe I'd never mattered to her at all. The days after that letter turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, and slowly I stopped expecting Derek to call back. I stopped expecting my mother to change her mind. I stopped expecting anything except the dull ache that settled in my chest and never quite left. I threw myself into work. I was a civil engineer, designing water treatment systems for municipalities across the Pacific Northwest. It was good work, important work, the kind that let me focus on problems that had solutions. I worked late. I worked weekends. I worked until my boss pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. "Fine," I said. "Everything's fine." It wasn't fine. I wasn't sleeping. I'd lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. I'd stopped returning calls from friends, stopped going to the gym, stopped doing anything that wasn't absolutely necessary to keep my life from falling apart entirely. My apartment became a place I slept and sometimes ate, nothing more. The plants I'd bought in a moment of optimism withered on the windowsill. The guitar I used to play gathered dust in the corner. I started having this recurring dream. I'd be at my grandmother's house, walking through the rooms, and everything would be slightly wrong. The furniture would be in different places. The pictures on the walls would show people I didn't recognize. I'd call out for her, but my voice wouldn't make any sound. And then I'd find Derek, sitting in her favorite chair, smiling at me with this look of profound satisfaction. "You were never really family," he'd say. "You just didn't know it yet." I'd wake up sweating, heart racing, and have to remind myself it was just a dream. Except it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like the truth I'd been too naive to see. My relationship with Derek had always been complicated. He was the golden child, the one who excelled at sports and charmed teachers and made friends effortlessly. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred books to parties, who took things too seriously, who never quite fit in. Growing up, I'd worshipped him. Followed him around like a shadow. Tried to be like him. He tolerated me, mostly. Sometimes he'd let me tag along when he went out with his friends. More often, he'd tell me to get lost. There was this one time, I must have been 14, when I asked if I could go to a concert with him and his girlfriend. He looked at me like I'd just asked to borrow his kidney. "Why would I bring you?" he said. "You'd just embarrass me." I never asked again. But we weren't enemies. We didn't fight, not really. We just existed in separate orbits, occasionally intersecting at family dinners and holidays, maintaining the fiction that we were close because that's what brothers were supposed to be. I told myself it was normal. That all siblings had distance. That when we were older, things would be different. The inheritance proved me wrong. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After a year of silence, I tried one more time. I drove to Providence, showed up at my mother's house unannounced. Derek's car was in the driveway. I almost turned around, but something stubborn in me refused to run. I knocked. My mother answered. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, discomfort, resignation, before settling on polite coldness. "Marcus. What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Derek." "He's busy." "I can wait." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled the same, like coffee and the lavender potpourri she kept in bowls around the living room. Nothing had changed. The same couch, the same photos on the mantel, the same sense that I was an intruder in a place that used to be home. Derek was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a beer in his hand. He looked good. Relaxed. He'd put on a little weight, but it suited him. Made him look successful, prosperous. He saw me and his expression didn't change. "Hey," I said. "Hey. Can we talk?" He took a long drink from his beer. "Sure." "What about?" "The inheritance. Grandma's will. I just want to understand." "Understand what?" "Why she left everything to you." He shrugged. "You'd have to ask her, but she's dead, so I guess you're out of luck." "Derek, come on. We're brothers." "Are we?" He set the beer down, crossed his arms. "Because I don't remember you acting like it. I don't remember you showing up for family dinners or calling on birthdays or giving a damn about anyone but yourself. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you visited Mom? When was the last time you asked how I was doing?" I opened my mouth, closed it. The truth was, I couldn't remember. I'd been so focused on my own life, my own career, my own problems, that I'd let the distance grow without noticing. But that didn't explain the will. That didn't explain $2.4 million. "I was at Grandma's every summer," I said. "I spent time with her. I thought we were close." "You thought wrong." Derek picked up his beer again. "She told me, you know. Told me she was leaving everything to me. Said you'd become a stranger. Said you only showed up when it was convenient, when you needed something." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you visit her the last 2 years of her life?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. The last 2 years. I'd been busy. There'd been a major project at work, a promotion I was chasing, a relationship that fell apart and left me hollow. I'd meant to visit. I'd planned to. But plans aren't the same as action, and intentions don't count for anything when someone's dying. "I didn't know she was sick," I said weakly. "She had cancer, Marcus. Stage 4. Everyone knew. No one told me. Because you never asked." We stood there, two brothers who barely recognized each other, and I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been absent. Maybe I'd taken her for granted, assumed she'd always be there, always waiting for me to show up when I finally had time. But $2.4 million. That wasn't just about visits and phone calls. That was about erasing me completely. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have been there more. But cutting me out entirely? That's cruel. Life's cruel." Derek finished his beer, tossed the bottle in the recycling. "You'll get over it. That was 3 years ago. I left that house and didn't go back. Didn't call. Didn't send birthday cards or Christmas gifts. If they wanted me gone, I'd be gone. I moved through my life like a ghost, present but not really there, going through the motions of existence without feeling any of it. Work. Sleep. Repeat. That was the rhythm I settled into. My boss stopped asking if I was okay. My friends stopped inviting me out. I became the guy who was always busy, always working, always fine. And maybe I believed it, after a while. Maybe I convinced myself that I didn't need family, didn't need connection, didn't need anything except the steady drone of work and sleep and more work. Then Patricia Chan called, and everything changed. I made the drive to Boston the next morning, left at 4 so I'd miss the worst of the traffic. The highway was dark and empty, just me and the long-haul truckers and the occasional commuter who'd started their day even earlier than I had. I drank gas station coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and listened to a podcast about the history of the Panama Canal, anything to keep my mind from spiraling into questions I couldn't answer. What kind of development? What documents? Why now, after 3 years? The office of Whitmore and Associates was in a brownstone in Back Bay, the kind of building that screamed old money and discretion. I arrived 20 minutes early, sat in my car, and watched well-dressed people hurry past with their briefcases and their confident strides. I felt out of place in my rumpled button-down and jeans, like a kid who'd wandered into the adult section by mistake. At 9:50, I went inside. The receptionist was young, probably fresh out of college, with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She checked my name against a list, nodded, and told me to wait. The waiting area had leather chairs and art that looked expensive but forgettable. I sat. I waited. I tried not to think about the last time I'd been in a lawyer's office, signing papers to contest the will, only to be told I didn't have a case. Mr. Sullivan? Patricia Chan stood in the doorway, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. Please, come with me. I followed her down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-looking men in suits, past conference rooms where other meetings were happening behind closed doors, to a small office at the end. She gestured to a chair. I sat. Thank you for coming on such short notice, she said, settling behind her desk. I know this must be confusing. That's one word for it. She opened a file folder, pulled out a stack of papers, and slid them across the desk. These documents came to light during a routine audit of your grandmother's estate. They were misfiled, apparently, during the initial probate process. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs. Just tell me. Your grandmother's will, the one that left everything to your brother, was altered. The original will split the estate equally between you and Derek. 2 years before her death, a new will was drafted and signed, disinheriting you completely. But the signature on that second will, she paused, looked me in the eye, it's a forgery. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling. What? We had a handwriting expert examine both documents. The original will bears your grandmother's authentic signature. The second one, the one that excluded you, does not. Someone forged her signature, filed fraudulent paperwork, and manipulated the probate process. Who? She didn't answer immediately. Didn't need to. I already knew. Derek. The name came out like poison. Patricia Chan nodded slowly. We believe so. There's evidence that he had access to her legal documents, that he was present when the forged will was notarized by someone who has since lost their license for similar misconduct. We're building a case, but it's going to take time. What I need from you today is your authorization to move forward with legal action. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The words kept echoing in my head. Forgery. Manipulation. Derek. My brother had stolen from me. Not just money. He'd stolen 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing I wasn't good enough, wasn't loved enough, wasn't worth anything to the people who were supposed to care about me. And my mother. She'd known. She had to have known. She'd defended him, blamed me, cut me out, all while knowing the truth. Mr. Sullivan? Patricia's voice pulled me back. I need to know if you want to proceed. I looked down at the papers in front of me. Legal jargon I didn't fully understand. But the core of it was clear. I could fight this. I could take back what was mine. I could make them answer for what they'd done. Yes, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. Yes, I want to proceed. She nodded, made a note. Good. I'll need you to sign some forms, and then we'll begin the process of freezing the estate assets and filing a motion to overturn the fraudulent will. This won't be quick, and it won't be easy. Your brother will fight back. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Derek's face in my mother's kitchen, that smug satisfaction, the casual cruelty. I thought about every year I'd spent believing I deserved to be forgotten. I thought about my grandmother's garden, the tomatoes and basil, the sun on my face, her voice telling me I was thoughtful, that I was rare. I'm prepared, I said. Over the next hour, I signed documents and listened to Patricia outline the legal strategy. She was thorough, methodical, the kind of lawyer who left nothing to chance. By the time I left her office, the sun was high and bright, and the world looked different. Sharper. More real. I sat in my car and called my boss. Told him I needed to take some personal time. He didn't ask questions, just told me to do what I needed to do. Then I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, and let myself feel it. The anger. The betrayal. The grief for the family I'd never really had. But underneath all of that, something else. Something hard and cold and determined. Derek had made a choice. He'd gambled that I'd never find out, that I'd accept my place as the forgotten son and move on with my life. He'd underestimated me. They all had. I started the car and pulled out into traffic, heading not back to Portland but toward Providence. Toward my mother's house. Toward the confrontation I should have had 3 years ago. Because if there's one thing I learned in that lawyer's office, it's that silence doesn't keep the peace. It just lets the poison spread. And I was done being quiet. I was done accepting their version of the story. I was done pretending that family meant anything when it was built on lies. The drive took less than an hour. I knew the route by heart, could have driven it blindfolded. Every exit, every landmark, every turn that brought me closer to the house where I grew up. The maple tree was still there, bigger now, its branches reaching toward the second-story windows. The shutters were still crooked. Some things never change. Derek's car wasn't in the driveway. Just my mother's sedan, the same one she'd been driving for a decade. I parked on the street and sat there for a moment, gathering myself. Through the front window, I could see her moving around the living room. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Or maybe I just stopped seeing her as the invincible figure from my childhood. I got out of the car. Walked up the driveway. The concrete had a crack running through it that hadn't been there before. Weeds grew in the gaps. I rang the doorbell and waited. She opened the door with a dish towel in her hands, her expression shifting from neutral to shocked in the space of a heartbeat. Marcus. What are you doing here? We need to talk. Her jaw tightened. Now's not a good time. I don't care. I pushed past her into the house, not rough but firm enough to make it clear I wasn't leaving. She followed me into the living room, wringing the dish towel like she wanted to strangle it. You can't just show up like this. I just came from a lawyer's office in Boston. I turned to face her. Patricia Chen. Does that name mean anything to you? Her face went pale. I watched it happen, watched the color drain away and the truth settle in her eyes. She knew. Of course she knew. Marcus, let me explain. Explain what? That you knew Derek forged Grandma's will? That you let me believe I wasn't good enough for 3 years while he stole $2.4 million? Explain that. She sank onto the couch, still clutching the towel. It's not that simple. Then make it simple. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Just sat there, staring at her hands, at the worn fabric of the couch, at anything but me. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet but not crying. She wouldn't give me that. Your grandmother changed her mind about you, she said quietly. Toward the end, she was angry. She felt like you'd abandoned her. Derek was there, Marcus. He visited every week. He called every day. He took care of her when she got sick. So he earned the right to forge her signature? No. She closed her eyes. No, but he was desperate. The business was failing, he had debts, he needed the money to survive. I told him it was wrong, but he didn't listen. And then it was done, and I thought, maybe it's for the best. Maybe you'd be better off not knowing. Better off? My voice cracked. You let me think I was worthless. You blamed me. You chose him. He's my son too. And I'm not? The question hung in the air between us. She didn't answer it. Couldn't answer it. Because the truth was written in every choice she'd made, every phone call she hadn't returned, every holiday she'd spent with Derek while I sat alone in my apartment wondering what I'd done wrong. I need you to tell me the truth, I said. All of it. What really happened? She took a shaky breath, and for the first time in my life, I saw my mother as she really was. Not the strong, unshakable figure I'd built in my mind, but a woman who'd made terrible choices and couldn't figure out how to live with them. And as she started to speak, I realized that whatever came next, whatever truth she was about to reveal, it would change everything. Again. The fight for my inheritance had just begun. But the fight for understanding, for closure, for some kind of peace with the family that had broken me, that was going to be so much harder. I sat down across from her and waited for the words that would either set me free or destroy what little hope I had left. My mother's hands wouldn't stop moving. They twisted the dish towel, smoothed it flat against her lap, then twisted it again. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon light streaming through the window, the same window where I used to press my face against the glass waiting for my father to come home from work. He'd been gone 8 years now. Heart attack at 53. Sometimes I wondered what he would have made of all this. Your grandmother did change her will, my mother said finally. The first time. That part was real. What do you mean the first time? She looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Shame. It sat heavy in the lines around her mouth, in the way her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. 2 years before she died, Eleanor called me. Said she wanted to talk about her estate. She was upset with you, Marcus. You hadn't visited in over a year. You'd missed her birthday. She felt forgotten. I was working on the Seattle project, I said, but the excuse sounded hollow even to me. It had been a massive undertaking, a water reclamation system that would serve 500,000 people. I'd been consumed by it, 14-hour days, weekends in the office, my entire life reduced to engineering schematics and budget projections. But that didn't change the fact that I'd let a year slip by without seeing her. She knew about your work, my mother continued. She was proud of you, actually. But pride doesn't keep you company when you're lonely. Derek was there. He'd moved back to Boston by then, was trying to get his investment firm off the ground. He visited her twice a week. Brought groceries. Fixed things around the house. He was present. So she rewrote the will. She had her lawyer draft a new version. 75% to Derek, 25% to you. She called it fair compensation for his attentiveness. I tried to talk her out of it, told her you were busy building a career, that you'd come around. But she was stubborn. You know how she could be. I did know. Eleanor Sullivan didn't make decisions lightly, and once made, she rarely reversed them. But 75-25 wasn't the same as everything to nothing. That's not what the will said when she died, I pointed out. My mother's face crumpled. No. No, it wasn't. She stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out at the street like she might find answers written in the asphalt. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. 6 months before she died, Eleanor had a stroke. Not a major one, but enough to scare her. She couldn't write properly for weeks. Her signature looked like a child's scrawl. The doctors said she'd recover most of her fine motor control, and she did, eventually. But during that time, Derek was handling all her paperwork. Bills, insurance forms, everything that needed a signature. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Go on. He told me later that he'd been planning it for months. The stroke just gave him the opportunity. He had a notary friend, someone he'd done business with, someone who was willing to look the other way for the right price. They drafted a new will. Total disinheritance. Derek gets everything. And they forged Eleanor's signature using documents from before the stroke, when her handwriting was still steady. Why didn't you stop him? She turned to face me, and I saw tears tracking down her cheeks. Silent, bitter tears that looked like they'd been held back for years. Because by the time I found out, it was done. The will was filed. Eleanor was dead. And Derek, he swore to me it was what she really wanted. He said she'd told him in private that she wanted to cut you out completely, that the 75-25 split wasn't enough, that you'd hurt her too badly. He said he was just making sure her true wishes were honored. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Your brother has his flaws, Marcus, but I never thought he'd lie to me about something like that. And you'd been so distant. You barely called. You missed your father's birthday the year he died. You weren't there when Eleanor went into hospice. From where I stood, it looked like Derek was telling the truth. The room felt too small suddenly. Too warm. I stood up, paced to the mantel, looked at the family photos arranged there. Derek's college graduation. My high school portrait. A picture of all of us at Cape Cod when I was 10 and Derek was 14, before everything got complicated. We looked happy. Maybe we had been, once. When did you find out he was lying? 2 years ago. Maybe a little less. I found documents in his apartment when I was helping him move. Emails between him and the notary, talking about the forgery. Talking about how much it cost. Talking about splitting the estate money to pay off his debts. My hands clenched into fists. 2 years. She'd known for 2 years and never said a word. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice broke. Because I didn't know how. Because I was ashamed. Because every day I didn't tell you made it harder to tell you the next day, and then it had been months, and then it had been years, and I convinced myself that maybe it was better if you never knew. That maybe you'd moved on. That maybe it would hurt you less if you just believed Eleanor didn't love you enough. Better? I turned on her. You thought it was better for me to spend 3 years thinking I was worthless to my own grandmother? I thought it would be easier than knowing your brother betrayed you. It wasn't easier. Nothing about the last 3 years had been easy. I'd spiraled. Lost myself. Became a hollow version of the person I used to be. And she'd let it happen because the truth was too inconvenient, too painful, too damaging to the son she'd chosen to protect. Where is he? I asked. She blinked. What? Derek. Where is he right now? I don't know. He doesn't tell me everything. Call him. Marcus, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't care what you think. I pulled out my phone, pulled up Derek's contact. The number I'd deleted and re-added a dozen times over the years, never quite able to let go completely. Call him, or I will. She reached for her phone with shaking hands. Dialed. Put it on speaker. It rang 4 times before he picked up. Hey Mom. What's up? His voice. Casual. Easy. Like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he hadn't stolen everything from me and slept soundly every night since. Derek, your brother is here. Silence. Then, Marcus? We need to talk, I said. Another pause. I could almost hear him thinking, calculating. When he spoke again, the casual tone was gone, replaced by something harder. About what? You know what? I'm kind of busy right now. Make time. He laughed, sharp and humorless. You don't get to show up after 3 years and make demands. I just came from Whitmore and Associates. Patricia Chen sends her regards. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. I could hear him breathing, could picture him standing wherever he was, face draining of color, mind racing through options. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. "Forgery, Derek. $2.4 million. A notary who lost his license. Should I keep going? You can't prove anything." "I don't have to. The lawyers already did. Handwriting analysis. Document trails. They've got everything." He didn't respond. In the background, I heard traffic. He was outside somewhere. Maybe walking to his car. Maybe trying to put distance between himself and whatever life he'd built with stolen money. "Where are you?" I asked again. "Why does it matter?" "Because we're going to have this conversation face to face. You owe me that much." "I don't owe you anything." The line went dead. I looked at my mother. She'd sunk back onto the couch, the phone still in her hand, staring at it like it might come alive and bite her. "He hung up," she said numbly. "He'll call back." I sat down across from her. "Or he'll run. Either way, this ends now." We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, a car drove past. A dog barked. Normal sounds from a normal afternoon in a normal neighborhood where normal families lived normal lives. But there was nothing normal about this. Nothing normal about sitting in my childhood home, watching my mother come apart at the seams, waiting for my brother to either face what he'd done or disappear forever. "Tell me about the business," I said eventually. "His investment firm. You said it was failing." She nodded. "Derek made some bad calls early on. Invested client money in ventures that didn't pan out. He was hemorrhaging capital, facing potential lawsuits. He needed cash fast, and Eleanor's estate was the answer." "How much of the inheritance is left?" "I don't know. He won't tell me. But he's still living in that condo in the North End, still driving the Audi. Either he's better at hiding money than I think, or he burned through most of it keeping up appearances." "And you're okay with that?" She looked at me sharply. "Of course I'm not okay with it. But what was I supposed to do? Turn in my own son?" "Yes." The word came out harder than I intended. "That's exactly what you should have done. Easy for you to say. You don't have children. You don't know what it's like to love someone who's made terrible choices." I stood up. "You're right. I don't have children. But I know what it's like to be the child who gets sacrificed so the other one can keep making terrible choices without consequences. That's not fair. None of this is fair. That's the point." I walked out of the living room, down the hallway to the kitchen. It looked the same as it always had. White cabinets, green countertops, the table where we'd eaten dinner every night as kids. I remembered Derek sitting across from me, kicking my shins under the table when Mom wasn't looking. I remembered my father at the head, reading the newspaper while he ate. I remembered feeling safe here, once. My mother followed me. "Marcus, please. I know I made mistakes. I know I should have told you sooner. But I'm still your mother. That has to count for something." "It should," I said. "But right now, I don't know what it counts for." She flinched like I'd hit her. I almost felt bad. Almost. But the anger burning in my chest wouldn't let me soften. Not yet. Maybe not ever. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the marina. 1 hour. Come alone." I showed it to my mother. "Derek?" She nodded. "That's his new number. He changes them every few months. Thinks it makes him harder to track." "Track for what?" She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Derek wasn't just running from me. He was running from something bigger. Debts. Angry clients. Maybe the law. My brother had built a house of cards, and it was finally collapsing. "I'm going," I said. "Marcus, be careful. He's not the same person you remember. Neither am I." I left her standing in the kitchen and walked back out to my car. The drive to the marina took 20 minutes through late afternoon traffic. I knew which one she meant. There was only one marina in Providence where Derek would go, the expensive one on the east side where he kept a sailboat he couldn't afford but refused to sell because it made him look successful. The parking lot was half empty. A few cars scattered near the entrance, couple of trucks by the boat slips. I found a spot with a view of the water and waited. Checked my phone. Checked the time. Watched seagulls circle overhead, crying their strange mechanical cries. At exactly 1 hour, a black Audi pulled in 3 spaces away. Derek got out. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner. Harder. His hair was shorter, graying at the temples. He wore an expensive suit that didn't quite fit right anymore, like he'd lost weight and hadn't bothered to get it tailored. He saw me and stopped. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the parking lot. Brothers. Strangers. Enemies. All of it true at once. He walked over slowly. I got out of my car. We met in the space between vehicles, close enough to talk without shouting, far enough to maintain distance. "You look good," he said. I didn't return the compliment. "Why'd you do it?" His jaw tightened. Straight to the point. No small talk. "That's very you." "Answer the question." He looked past me at the water. A yacht was pulling out of its slip, engine rumbling, someone's weekend adventure beginning. Derek watched it like he wanted to be on it, sailing away from this conversation, from this reckoning. "I needed the money," he said finally. "It's that simple." "It's not simple. You had options. You could have asked for a loan. You could have declared bankruptcy. You could have done anything except steal from me." He laughed bitterly. "Steal from you? That money was never yours. Grandma left it to me. She left 75% to you. 25% to me. You forged oil to take my share. Your share." He turned to face me fully now, and I saw something dangerous in his eyes. "Your share of what?" "You abandoned her. You treated her like an obligation, like a box to check when you had time between your precious engineering projects. I was there, Marcus. I was there when she fell and couldn't get up. I was there when she couldn't remember what year it was. I was there when she cried because her grandson was too busy to visit. So don't talk to me about your share." His words hit like punches, each one landing in places that were already bruised. Because he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been absent. I had prioritized work over family. I had let time slip away until it was too late. But that didn't justify forgery. That didn't justify 3 years of lies. "You could have talked to me," I said. "You could have told me she needed help. I would have come. Would you?" Because I called. I left messages. I sent emails. You were always too busy, always had some project that was more important. So excuse me if I didn't think you'd suddenly show up because I asked nicely. I didn't know what to say to that. The accusations stung because they contained fragments of truth wrapped in Derek's manipulation. Yes, I'd been busy. Yes, I'd missed calls. But he'd made it sound like I'd deliberately chosen to ignore our grandmother when the reality was more complicated. Life had gotten away from me. Work had consumed me. And by the time I'd looked up and realized how much time had passed, it was too late. Even if I was a terrible grandson, that doesn't give you the right to forge documents and steal my inheritance. It wasn't stealing. He stepped closer. I earned that money. I put in the time, the effort, the emotional labor. You think it was easy watching her fade? You think it was fun dealing with her paranoia, her mood swings, her middle-of-the-night phone calls because she'd forgotten where she was? I did all of that. You did nothing. The money was compensation. Compensation you took by committing fraud. His face flushed. You want to talk about fraud? Let's talk about how you've spent the last 3 years playing the victim. Poor Marcus, forgotten by his family. Poor Marcus, cut out of the will. You've been dining out on that story, haven't you? Getting sympathy from friends, using it as an excuse for why your life fell apart. My life fell apart because my family betrayed me. Your life fell apart because you couldn't handle disappointment. He was shouting now, drawing looks from a couple walking their dog along the waterfront. You've always been like this. Everything has to be perfect, has to go according to plan. And when it doesn't, you collapse. You shut down. You blame everyone else instead of looking at yourself. I felt my hands shaking. Not from fear. From rage. Pure, crystalline rage that I'd been holding back for 3 years, that I'd been swallowing and suppressing and trying to rationalize away. You forged her signature, I said, voice low and deadly calm. You manipulated probate documents. You stole $2.4 million. And now you're trying to make this about my character flaws? I'm trying to make you see reality. Derek's voice dropped too, matching my intensity. The reality is that Grandma didn't want you to have that money. Maybe she didn't say it explicitly, maybe she didn't sign the final will herself, but her intentions were clear. She was done with you. And I just made sure those intentions were honored. That's a lie and you know it. Do I? He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then held it up. An email. From Eleanor Sullivan's account to Derek. Dated 6 months before her death. I don't know what to do about Marcus anymore. He's become a stranger. Maybe it's better to focus on the family members who actually care. I stared at the screen. The words blurred. My grandmother's email address. Her writing style. It looked real. She sent that 3 weeks before her stroke, Derek said. 3 weeks before she lost the ability to write clearly. So tell me, Marcus. Tell me I'm lying about what she wanted. I couldn't speak. The email felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, twisting. If it was real, if she'd actually written that, then maybe Derek was right. Maybe I had lost her long before the will was ever forged. But even if that were true, it didn't change what he'd done. I don't believe you, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Believe what you want. He pocketed his phone. The lawyers can fight it out. But you're not going to win this, Marcus. You're going to drag us both through court, spend tens of thousands on legal fees, and in the end, you'll get nothing because I'll bury you in motions and appeals until you give up. I won't give up. He smiled, cold and sharp. Yes, you will. Because that's what you do. You quit when things get hard. You quit on Grandma. You quit on this family. And you'll quit on this fight too. He turned and walked back toward his car. I stood there, paralyzed, watching him go. Every instinct screamed at me to follow him, to tackle him to the ground, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But I didn't move. Couldn't move. Because part of me was afraid he was right. Derek got in his Audi and drove away without looking back. I stood in that parking lot until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and I tried to figure out who I was anymore. The boy who'd loved his grandmother and believed family meant something. The man who'd let work consume him until nothing else mattered. The victim of a cruel betrayal. The architect of his own isolation. Maybe I was all of those things. Maybe none of them. Maybe the truth was somewhere in the messy middle where nothing was clear and everyone was both right and wrong. I drove back to my mother's house as darkness fell. Her car was still in the driveway. The lights were on inside. I could see her moving around the kitchen through the window. Making dinner probably. Going through the motions of normalcy while her family imploded around her. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my car and called Patricia Chin. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Sullivan. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. I met with my brother. And? He's not backing down. He thinks he can drag this out until I give up. Can he? I thought about Derek's face, that cold confidence. I thought about the email from my grandmother, the words that suggested maybe he wasn't entirely wrong about her intentions. I thought about the long legal battle ahead, the money it would cost, the emotional toll it would take. No, I said. He can't. Good. Because I've been doing some additional research. There's more to this case than we initially discussed. What kind of more? The kind that suggests your brother has been engaging in a pattern of financial fraud that extends well beyond your grandmother's estate. If we play this right, we might be able to bring criminal charges, not just civil. My heart rate picked up. Criminal charges? Wire fraud. Identity theft. Possibly elder abuse if we can prove he manipulated your grandmother while she was incapacitated. The evidence is circumstantial right now, but with your cooperation and some investigative work, we could build a case. What do you need from me? Everything. Every email, every text message, every conversation you've had with Derek or your mother about the estate. Every memory you have of your grandmother's final years, her mental state, her relationships. We need to establish a timeline and a pattern of behavior. I can do that. There's something else. She paused. Your mother. She had knowledge of the forgery and didn't report it. That makes her an accessory after the fact. If this goes to criminal trial, she could face charges too. The weight of that settled over me like concrete. My mother. The woman who'd raised me, who'd bandaged my skinned knees and packed my school lunches and told me she loved me even when I didn't deserve it. She'd made terrible choices. She'd chosen Derek over me. But did I want to see her prosecuted? Let me think about it, I said. Take your time. But Marcus, you need to understand something. If we go down this road, there's no going back. Your family will never be the same. It's already not the same. No, but it could get worse. Much worse. Are you prepared for that? I looked at the house. At the light spilling from the windows. At the life I used to have and could never get back. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. We talked for another 20 minutes about next steps, about documentation and depositions and the long machinery of justice grinding into motion. By the time I hung up, it was fully dark. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of a television through someone's open window. I finally got out of my car and walked to the front door. Knocked instead of using my key. My mother answered, eyes red from crying. Are you staying? She asked. No. I just came to tell you something. She wrapped her arms around herself. What? I'm moving forward with the case. Criminal charges if possible. And if that means you get caught in the fallout, then that's what happens. She absorbed this without flinching. I understand. I don't think you do. This isn't just about getting my inheritance back anymore. This is about accountability. Derek needs to face consequences. And so do you. She nodded slowly. You're right. We do. I didn't expect her to agree. Didn't know what to do with her acceptance. It would have been easier if she'd fought back, if she'd defended herself, if she'd given me someone to rage against. Why didn't you protect me? The question came out before I could stop it. All those years, all those times Derek got away with things, you always took his side. Why? She looked down at her hands. Because I failed him first. What? When you were little, you were easy. You didn't cry much. You slept through the night. You entertained yourself. But Derek, he was difficult. Colicky. Demanding. And I resented him for it. I spent the first 2 years of his life counting down the hours until your father came home so I could hand him off. I was a terrible mother to him. So you spent the rest of his life making up for it. She nodded. I tried to fix it. Tried to give him extra attention, extra grace, extra chances. And somewhere along the way, it became habit. Derek needs help, so I help him. Derek makes mistakes, so I excuse them. Derek hurts people, so I rationalize it. And you were fine. You didn't need me the way he did. I needed you. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. I know that now. But by the time I realized what I was doing, the pattern was set. And I didn't know how to break it. We stood there in the doorway, mother and son, both damaged by the choices we'd made and the choices made for us. I'm sorry, she whispered. Me too. I turned and walked back to my car. Didn't look back. Didn't wait to see if she'd call after me. I just got in, started the engine, and drove away from that house for what might be the last time. The hotel I found was cheap and anonymous, the kind of place where no one asks questions and the thin walls let you hear your neighbors' entire lives. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to a couple arguing next door, and I thought about family. How it's supposed to be the people who know you best and love you most. How it's actually just a group of people bound by biology and proximity, capable of inflicting wounds that never fully heal. How sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Your father would be proud of you. For standing up for yourself. For not letting this go. He always said you had more strength than you knew. I read it 3 times. Tried to find comfort in it. Failed. Because the truth was, I didn't feel strong. I felt hollowed out. Exhausted. Like I'd been fighting for so long that I'd forgotten what I was fighting for. The inheritance? That was just money. It wouldn't bring my grandmother back. It wouldn't erase the last 3 years. It wouldn't fix what was broken. Justice? Maybe. But justice was cold comfort when you had to destroy your family to get it. I fell asleep fully clothed, phone clutched in my hand, and dreamed of my grandmother's garden. The tomatoes growing wild. The basil fragrant in the sun. Her hands in the dirt, patient and sure. You're a thoughtful boy, Marcus. You think before you act. In the dream, I wanted to ask her if I'd thought too much. If I'd let thinking replace doing until I thought myself right out of her life. But dreams don't work that way. She just kept gardening, and I kept watching, and when I woke up the next morning, I was alone in a hotel room that smelled like bleach and old cigarettes, and my phone was ringing. Patricia Chen. Mr. Sullivan, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Your brother filed an emergency motion this morning. He's claiming you're harassing him, that you threatened him at the marina, that he fears for his safety. That's ridiculous. I never threatened him. I know. But he's asking for a restraining order. And if he gets it, it's going to complicate our case significantly. I sat up, head pounding. Can he do that? He can try. We have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. You'll need to be there. Tomorrow? I'm in Providence. Then you'd better get back to Boston. I hung up and checked the time. 7 in the morning. I'd slept for almost 10 hours, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that comes from pure exhaustion. Outside, traffic was already building. People heading to work, to school, to lives that made sense. I showered, checked out, and started the drive back to Boston. My phone rang twice. My mother. I didn't answer. Whatever she had to say could wait until after I dealt with Derek's latest move. Because that's what this was. A move. A play in the game he'd been winning for years. He'd seen my threat coming and was preempting it, trying to paint me as the aggressor, the unstable one, the danger. It was brilliant, actually. Diabolical, but brilliant. The hearing was in a small courtroom in Suffolk County. I arrived early, met Patricia in the hallway. She briefed me quickly. Derek would present his case. I'd present mine. The judge would decide. Simple. Except nothing about this was simple. Derek arrived with his own lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a power suit who radiated competence. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. Derek wouldn't look at me. Just stared straight ahead, playing the role of frightened victim perfectly. The judge was an older woman with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. She called the court to order. "Mr. Derek Sullivan, you're seeking a restraining order against your brother, Marcus Sullivan." "On what grounds?" Derek's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to escalating harassment from his brother, including in confrontation yesterday at a marina where threatening language was used and my client feared for his physical safety." The judge looked at me. "Mr. Marcus Sullivan, how do you respond?" Patricia stood. "Your Honor, this is a baseless claim designed to intimidate my client and interfere with ongoing legal proceedings regarding a disputed estate." The confrontation in question was a conversation between brothers about a serious family matter. No threats were made. The judge's eyes moved between us. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Derek Sullivan directly." "Sir, please describe what happened at this marina." Derek stood. He looked smaller than he had yesterday. Vulnerable. He'd always been good at that, making himself look like the underdog even when he held all the cards. "Your Honor, my brother showed up unexpectedly and confronted me about our grandmother's will. He was aggressive, angry. He told me I'd stolen from him, that I was going to pay for what I'd done. The way he said it, it felt like a threat. I've never seen him like that before. It scared me. Lies. All lies wrapped in just enough truth to sound plausible. Mr. Marcus Sullivan, your turn." I stood. Felt the weight of the judge's scrutiny. Felt Derek's eyes on me even though he wouldn't look directly. Felt the future balancing on whatever words came out of my mouth next. "Your Honor, I did confront my brother about the will. I recently discovered evidence that suggests the will was forged, that my grandmother's signature was faked, and that I was fraudulently disinherited. I wanted answers. I was angry, yes. But I never threatened violence. I never threatened him at all. This restraining order is his attempt to avoid accountability." The judge made a note. "Evidence of forgery. That's a serious allegation." "Yes, Your Honor. My attorney has the documentation." Patricia stepped forward with a folder. The judge took it, flipped through it slowly. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of paper. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. "This case clearly involves complex estate litigation that's beyond the scope of this hearing. However, based on what I'm seeing here, Mr. Derek Sullivan, your claims of harassment appear to be connected to legitimate legal inquiries about potentially fraudulent documents. I'm denying your request for a restraining order at this time." Derek's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up a hand. "However, I'm going to issue a mutual order requiring both parties to maintain civil contact only through their attorneys. No more surprise confrontations. No more meetings without legal representation present. Do you both understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia and Derek's lawyer said in unison. The judge banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." As we filed out, I caught Derek's eye. Just for a second. And in that second, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. He was losing control of the narrative. And he knew it. Outside the courthouse, Patricia pulled me aside. "That went better than expected. He's going to keep fighting." "Of course he is. But we have momentum now." The judge saw through his act. "That's a good sign. What happens next?" "We move forward with the civil suit to overturn the will. And I start building the criminal case in the background. It's going to take time, Marcus. Months, maybe years. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I looked back at the courthouse. At the building where justice was supposed to happen, where truth was supposed to matter. "I'm ready," I said. But as I drove back to Portland that afternoon, I wondered if that was true. If anyone was ever really ready to watch their family tear itself apart in the name of what's right. The miles passed. The highway stretched out ahead of me. And somewhere between Boston and home, I made a decision. I was going to see this through. No matter how long it took. no matter what it cost. Because Derek had made a mistake when he forged that will. He'd bet that I would give up. That I would accept being erased. That I would fade away quietly and let him win. But I wasn't that person anymore. The fight was just beginning. 18 months later, I sat in a different courtroom. Same city, different building. This one was bigger, more formal, with high ceilings and dark wood paneling that made every sound echo. The gallery was half full. Reporters in the back row. A few curious law students. My mother sat 3 rows behind Derek, not looking at either of us. Patricia Chin had been right about one thing. This process was slow. Agonizingly slow. Depositions and motions and counter-motions and delays. Derek's legal team threw up every roadblock they could find. They challenged the handwriting analysis. They questioned the credibility of the notary who'd lost his license. They argued procedural technicalities until the judge threatened to hold them in contempt. But we'd won more than we'd lost. The civil case to overturn the fraudulent will was solid. 3 different handwriting experts had confirmed the forgery. Financial records showed Derek had paid the notary $15,000 2 weeks before my grandmother died. Phone records placed them together multiple times during the period when the false will was created. The criminal investigation was moving slower. Wire fraud charges were being considered by the district attorney's office, but they wanted an airtight case before proceeding. Patricia had connected me with investigators who'd been building a broader picture of Derek's business practices. Turned out I wasn't his only victim. 3 former clients had come forward with allegations of misappropriation of funds. The house of cards was collapsing, but Derek kept scrambling to shore it up. He looked different now. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by something off the rack. His hair had gone fully gray. He'd lost more weight. When our eyes met across the courtroom, there was no smugness left. Just exhaustion and something that might have been regret if I was feeling generous. I wasn't feeling generous. The judge entered and we all stood. Judge Raymond Martinez, appointed after the previous judge recused himself due to a conflict of interest. Martinez had a reputation for being thorough and impatient with nonsense. That worked in our favor. He shuffled through papers, adjusted his glasses, and looked up. We're here for final arguments in the matter of Sullivan versus Sullivan, estate dispute. Counselors, are you ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said, standing. Derek's lawyer, a different one now, the sharp woman had quit 6 months ago, stood as well. Yes, Your Honor. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal language and rehashed arguments. Patricia laid out our case methodically. The timeline of the forgery. The evidence of Derek's financial desperation. The pattern of deception. She presented it all with clinical precision, building a narrative that was impossible to deny. Derek's lawyer tried. Argued that the handwriting analysis was inconclusive. That the financial transactions could be explained as legitimate business expenses. That my grandmother had expressed verbal wishes to disinherit me that weren't reflected in the earlier will. But even he seemed to know he was fighting a losing battle. His heart wasn't in it. When it was over, Judge Martinez removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I've reviewed all the evidence presented over the past 18 months. I've read the depositions, examined the expert testimony, considered the arguments from both sides. The courtroom went silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. It is the finding of this court that the will dated March 15, presenting Derek Sullivan as sole beneficiary, is fraudulent. The signature of Eleanor Sullivan on that document is a forgery, and the will is hereby declared null and void. The previous will, dated 2 years prior and dividing the estate 75% to Derek Sullivan and 25% to Marcus Sullivan, is reinstated as the valid last testament. I felt something break open in my chest. Not relief exactly. Something more complicated. Vindication mixed with grief mixed with a bone-deep weariness. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, I am ordering a full accounting of the estate assets currently held by Derek Sullivan, and the immediate transfer of 25% of those assets, plus accrued interest, to Marcus Sullivan. Mr. Derek Sullivan, you have 30 days to comply. Failure to do so will result in contempt charges and possible criminal referral. He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. Patricia turned to me, allowing herself a small smile. We won. Yeah. The word came out flat. We won. Derek and his lawyer left quickly, not looking back. My mother stayed in her seat, staring at nothing. I didn't approach her. Didn't know what I'd say if I did. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. Spring in Boston, the city coming back to life after a long winter. Patricia walked me to my car, briefcase in hand. The accounting will take a few weeks. Based on what we know, your share should be somewhere around $400,000. It would have been more, but Derek spent heavily over the past few years. $400,000. Not the full amount I should have gotten. Not even close. But more than nothing. More than I'd had yesterday. What about the criminal charges? Still pending. The DA is reviewing the case. With this ruling, they have more leverage. I'd say it's 50-50 whether they move forward. And my mother? Patricia hesitated. Technically she could be charged as an accessory. But given her cooperation during the investigation and the fact that she didn't financially benefit, I doubt they'll pursue it. The DA tends to focus resources on the primary offenders. I nodded. Felt that same complicated knot of emotions. Part of me wanted her punished. Part of me just wanted it to be over. Thank you, I said to Patricia. For everything. Just doing my job. She shook my hand. What will you do now? I don't know. Go back to Portland. Go back to work. Try to figure out what normal feels like. That's a good start. I drove around the city for a while before heading back. Past my grandmother's old house in Newton, sold years ago to pay for her care. Past the marina where I'd confronted Derek. Past my mother's house in Providence, though I didn't stop. Just drove by slowly, saw her car in the driveway, the lights on inside. My phone rang as I merged onto the highway. My mother. I almost didn't answer. Let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Marcus. Mom. I heard about the ruling. Yeah. I'm glad. She sounded tired. Older than her 62 years. You deserve to win. Did I? The question surprised me as much as it probably surprised her. Yes. What Derek did was wrong. What I did, not stopping him, that was wrong too. You had every right to fight. The highway stretched ahead, other cars flowing around me like a river around a stone. Why did you call? I asked. To apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words. I failed you, Marcus. As a mother, as a person. I chose comfort over truth, and you paid the price. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. Okay. Okay? I don't know what else to say. I'm glad you see it. But I can't tell you it's fine, because it's not. I know. A pause. Will I see you again? For holidays or birthdays or anything? I honestly don't know. Right now I need distance. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by what you and Derek did to me. I understand. Her voice cracked. I love you, Marcus. I know that doesn't fix anything, but it's true. I love you too, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. But love isn't enough sometimes. No. No, it's not. We hung up. I drove another hour before I had to pull over at a rest stop because my hands were shaking too badly to keep the wheel steady. I sat in the parking lot and cried for the first time since this whole thing started. Not angry tears. Not bitter tears. Just release. Just the accumulated weight of 18 months of fighting finally rolling off my shoulders. When I got back to Portland 2 days later, my apartment felt different. Smaller maybe. Or maybe I'd just outgrown it. The plants I'd bought after the court victory were thriving on the windowsill. The guitar in the corner had been played recently. I'd started lessons again, something to do with my hands besides work and worry. Work. I'd been doing the minimum to keep my job, focused so heavily on the legal battle that everything else became background noise. But my boss had been patient. Told me the position would be there when I was ready to really return to it. I called him the next morning. "Jim, it's Marcus. I think I'm ready." He laughed. "Took you long enough. We've got a project in Seattle that could use your touch. New water treatment facility. Big budget, tight timeline. Interested?" "Very." "Good. Come in tomorrow and we'll talk details." I hung up and looked around my apartment. $400,000 would arrive eventually. I could do a lot with that money. Buy a house. Travel. Invest. Save. But money wasn't going to fill the hole where my family used to be. Money wasn't going to answer the questions that still kept me up at night. My phone buzzed. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "I'm sorry." I opened it. "Marcus, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to contact you. But I needed to say this somewhere other than a courtroom with lawyers listening. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for forging the will. I'm sorry for lying about Grandma's wishes. I'm sorry for the last 3 years and everything I put you through. You were right about me. I was desperate and scared and I made terrible choices. The business is gone now. The condo is being foreclosed on. I'm probably going to jail when the criminal charges come through. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just trying to account for what I did. You deserved better. You always deserved better. I wish I'd been a different brother to you. Derek." I read it twice. Looked for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden ask for mercy. But it just seemed honest. Broken, but honest. I didn't respond. Maybe I would eventually. Maybe I wouldn't. Either way, it didn't change anything. Derek had made his choices. He'd have to live with the consequences. But I'd made choices too. I'd chosen to fight. I'd chosen truth over family peace. I'd chosen to stand up for myself even when it meant burning bridges that could never be rebuilt. Were they the right choices? I still didn't know. Maybe there were no right choices, only different paths with different costs. 3 months later, I was in Seattle, standing in a hard hat on a construction site, reviewing plans for the water treatment facility. The work was good. Complex and challenging in ways that made me feel useful again. The team respected my experience. My boss had hinted at a promotion if the project came in on time and under budget. Life was moving forward. Not back to normal, because normal didn't exist anymore. But forward toward something new. My phone rang. Patricia Chen. "Marcus, the DA made a decision." My stomach tightened. "And?" "They're moving forward with wire fraud charges against Derek. The trial is set for 6 months from now. They're going to need you to testify." "Okay." "There's something else. They're offering Derek a plea deal. If he pleads guilty, cooperates fully, and makes restitution to his other victims, they'll recommend a reduced sentence. 3 to 5 years instead of 10 to 15. Has he accepted?" "Not yet. He wanted me to ask you first." "Ask me what?" "Whether you'd support the plea agreement. Your testimony could make or break the trial. If you're willing to accept the plea, it might influence his decision." I stood there on that construction site, surrounded by the noise of machinery and workers shouting to each other, and thought about Derek in prison. Thought about him losing everything the way I almost had. Thought about revenge versus justice versus mercy. "Tell him I'll support the plea," I said. "On one condition." "What condition?" "He has to tell the truth. Complete truth. About the forgery, about the business fraud, about everything. No more lies. No more half-truths. Just accountability. I'll pass that along. 2 weeks later, Derek accepted the plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of forgery. The sentencing hearing was brief. He read a statement accepting responsibility. The judge gave him 4 years with possibility of parole after 2. I didn't attend. Didn't need to see him led away in handcuffs. Patricia sent me a summary of the proceedings. Derek's statement had mentioned me by name, apologized publicly, acknowledged the harm he'd caused. It didn't undo anything. But it was something. The money from the estate finally came through on a Tuesday in October. $417,000, deposited into my account electronically. I stared at the balance on my phone screen for a long time, waiting to feel something. Triumph. Satisfaction. Closure. What I felt was tired. I donated $50,000 to a foundation that provided legal aid to people contesting fraudulent wills. Kept the rest. Bought a small house outside Portland with a yard big enough for a garden. Started planting tomatoes and basil in the spring. The vines grew wild at first, tangled and unruly, until I learned to tie them properly so they wouldn't break under their own weight. My grandmother had taught me that. How to support something so it could grow without destroying itself. I thought about her often while I worked the soil. Wondered if she'd known what Derek was planning. Wondered if she'd have approved of how I fought back. Wondered if she'd be proud or disappointed or some mixture of both. I'd never know. That was the hardest part. Not the money. Not the betrayal. But the questions that would never have answers. My mother and I spoke occasionally. Brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays. Surface-level conversations about weather and work. We were rebuilding something, but neither of us knew what it would look like when finished. Maybe we never would. Derek wrote me from prison once. A short letter on lined paper, handwriting shaky. Said he was taking classes. Working in the kitchen. Trying to become someone different than who he'd been. Asked if maybe when he got out we could talk. Really talk. I wrote back. Said maybe. That was all I could offer. 2 years after the court ruling, I stood in my backyard on a warm summer evening, tomatoes ripening on the vines, and my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Is this Marcus Sullivan? Yes. This is Jennifer Rodriguez from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. I'm calling about the Eleanor Sullivan estate case. My chest tightened. What about it? We've recovered additional assets that were hidden during the initial investigation. Offshore accounts Derek had failed to disclose. After legal fees and restitution to other victims, there's approximately $300,000 remaining that belongs to you under the reinstated will. $300,000. On top of what I'd already received. More money than I knew what to do with. Mr. Sullivan? Are you there? Yeah. Yeah, I'm here. What do I need to do? She explained the process. More paperwork. More waiting. The money would arrive in 90 days. When I hung up, I sat down on my back porch and laughed. Not from joy. From the absurdity of it all. The universe kept handing me pieces of what I'd lost, like it could somehow make up for the years of pain and confusion and isolation. But money couldn't do that. Money couldn't give me back the relationship with my grandmother. Couldn't erase the betrayal. Couldn't restore the family that never really existed. What it could do was give me options. Freedom. Security. A foundation to build something new. I called my boss the next day and gave notice. Used part of the money to start my own consulting firm, specializing in water infrastructure for developing countries. Work that mattered. Work that helped people who actually needed it. The business grew slowly but steadily. I traveled to rural communities in South America and Africa, designing systems that brought clean water to people who'd never had it. It was hard work. Frustrating work. But it felt right in a way corporate engineering never had. 3 years after Derek went to prison, he was released on parole. I got a notification from the Victim Services Office. He called 2 days later. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. "Marcus, it's Derek. I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I don't blame you. But I'm out now, and I'm trying to make things right. I got a job at a community center, working with at-risk kids. Trying to keep them from making the same mistakes I did. I'm seeing a therapist. Going to meetings. Doing the work. I don't expect forgiveness. But if you're ever willing to meet for coffee, just to talk, I'd like that. No pressure. Just leaving the door open." I saved the message. Didn't delete it. Didn't respond. Just kept it there as a possibility. 6 months later, on a cold December morning, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop in Providence. Waiting. Nervous in a way I hadn't been nervous in years. Derek walked in. He looked different. Older, yes, but also lighter somehow. Like he'd put down weight he'd been carrying for decades. He saw me and stopped. Uncertain. I gestured to the empty chair. He sat. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Two brothers who destroyed each other and were now trying to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. "Thanks for coming," he said finally. "I'm not sure why I did." He nodded. "Fair." The conversation was halting at first. Awkward. We talked about surface things. His job at the community center. My consulting work. The weather. Neither of us mentioned the inheritance. Neither of us mentioned prison. Neither of us mentioned the years of pain. But slowly, carefully, we started talking about real things. Our grandmother. Our father. The family we'd been and the people we'd become. It wasn't healing. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was honest. As I drove home that evening, I thought about victories that feel like funerals. That's what I'd had. A victory over Derek. Over the fraud. Over the lies. But it had cost me everything familiar. Everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty and love. Was it worth it? I still asked myself that question sometimes. Usually late at night when the house was quiet and the ghosts of old hurts came visiting. The answer was always complicated. Yes, because truth matters. Because standing up for yourself matters. Because letting people get away with betrayal only teaches them they can do it again. But also no. Because family, even broken family, is hard to replace. Because the money didn't fill the hole. Because winning the fight didn't mean winning the war for peace. I planted my garden every spring. Tied the vines carefully so they'd grow strong. Made tomato sauce from the harvest and froze it for winter. Small rituals that connected me to my grandmother, to the person I used to be, to the person I was still becoming. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the work was done and the sun was setting, I'd sit on my porch and think about forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses or forgets. But the kind that acknowledges what happened and chooses to move forward anyway. The kind that says I was hurt, and I survived, and I'm building something better now. Derek and I met for coffee once a month. Sometimes twice. We were building something fragile and new. Not the brotherhood we'd had as kids. Not the hostile strangers we'd been in court. Something else. Something honest. My mother joined us sometimes. 3 broken people trying to figure out how to be a family again. It was messy. It was painful. But it was real. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the inheritance I'd really won wasn't the money. It was the understanding that family isn't about blood or obligation or what you inherit. It's about the connections you choose to maintain. The boundaries you set. The truth you insist on. The tomatoes grew. The seasons changed. Life continued. And I continued with it, carrying my scars but not defined by them, building a future that belonged to me and no one else. That was the real victory. Not the court ruling or the money or even the forced accountability. But the freedom to choose who I wanted to be, independent of the family that tried to erase me. I chose myself. And that choice made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.